Hello and welcome to the Tangy Stitches Knitting Podcast. My name is Claire, and in this episode we will be talking about one finished object, a lot of whips, including a couple of new cast-ons, and also a couple of new yarn acquisitions. So sit back, relax, grab your knitting needles, and let's get started. The first thing that I want to talk about is my one and only finished project for this episode, and it is the shirt that I'm wearing, which is the Sonya shirt by Paula Strict, and I knit mine out of the yarn Laying Vaya, which is a majority cotton yarn that also has some merino and yak, and I have a ball of this in a different color. So this is the Laying Vaya in an oatmeal-y color, and you could see that the yarn is this chainette kind of yarn, so it's really soft and light, very kind of airy. I was a bit off gauge with my Sonya shirt, so I believe that the gauge is supposed to be 24 stitches, and it is knit in a fingering weight yarn, so at 24 stitches that's kind of a loose drapey kind of gauge for a fingering weight yarn. And I used Laying Vaya, which is, it is a fingering weight yarn, but I was looking at the meterage, and for 50 grams of the Laying Vaya, it has 200 meters, whereas there are two recommended yarns for the Sonya shirt, and 50 grams equated to something like 212 or 225 meters in those yarns. So I think this yarn, I guess, is just slightly heavier maybe than the other yarns, so there's just slightly less meterage. But anyways, as I was saying, I was a bit off gauge with this, and I ended up with something between 27 to 28 stitches, whereas the pattern called for 24. So that is quite a bit off, and I knew that I was off going into it. I did size up my needles at least one size up, but even so, I guess I'm still like a very tight knitter, so my gauge was still very off, and I decided to knit the size 2, which I think I had calculated that it would put me in the range of between the size 1 and the size 2 in terms of the finished measurements. But now that this is finished, and I did just measure it, it seems to be just a bit smaller than even the size 1 would be. But I think it still fits really well. So you can kind of stand up and show the fit. This is in a black color, so it might be a little bit hard to see the details. I'm not really sure how it's picking up on camera. But the design of this shirt is that it's a t-shirt that has this, I guess would be a drop shoulder. And the drop shoulder is basically the whole length of the sleeve minus this little bit of ribbing that is on the sleeve edge. And when you knit the front, which also contains the sleeve, you get this kind of slanted line for the sleeve by doing decreases along the side here. And then everything else after you've knit the back and the front and then joined in the round and started to do these decreases for the sleeves, then you just knit in the round, and it is finished off on the hem and the collar by a twisted ribbing. And the other thing about the twisted rib that is both on the collar and the hem is that there is this line of stitches. I don't know how visible that is, but a line of stitches that goes around the edge before the hem. And the way that you do that is that you pick up the stitches and then you bind them off. And this is basically the bind off of the initial pickup. And then you re-pick up stitches to actually knit the collar. And I did do that for both the collar and the hemline. So it is a little bit of extra work because you are picking up the stitches once and binding them all off and then re-picking up the stitches. I think in the pattern she does have you insert a lifeline of some sort when you pick it up the first time so that it's easy to pick up the second time when you're picking up for the actual ribbing. And I think that little detail is pretty cool. It's definitely part of the design of this shirt, and I was happy to incorporate it in the way that the designer intended. The other part of the design is on the back shoulder. I'm going to show this shoulder is more to the light. But there is this kind of edge that is visible, and you create that when you join or when you pick up the front panel from the back panel by making it so it's almost like the edge that you started from is on the outside instead of the inside when you pick up the stitches for the front. And then that's how you kind of get this little edge. Although, like I said in my previous podcast, I think that I didn't necessarily do it exactly right. So I'm not fully sure if it is correct, but I think that that's the idea, is that you see kind of the cast on edge on the outside. Yeah, anyways, I think maybe with my gauge, it is just like a little bit thicker than it was meant to be. But I also think that this yarn is really light and comfortable. And I live in San Francisco, and it's actually been, I think, the coldest summer here for some number of decades. And we're seeing weather where we are not even getting into the 70s here. So I'm not too concerned about the thickness of the fabric here. So this is my Sonya shirt. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh, the one other thing that I wanted to say about this was this is not the first time that I've done a twisted rib hem, but when I did the Italian bind off or the tubular bind off for this was the first time that I did the tubular bind off in twisted rib, because when I had done a twisted rib ribbing for another sweater that I did, I didn't know that you needed to twist your stitches when doing the Italian bind off. And so for that one, what happened was that when I did the Italian bind off and didn't twist the stitches, then everything just was untwisted for that last stitch. And so it didn't look exactly right, but then it also looked very consistent across all of the stitches, so I wasn't gonna go back and redo it. Actually, I don't even think I knew like really what was going on at that point. But for this ribbing, I did do the Italian cast off, or the tubular cast off, because I did those extra double knitting rows in twisted rib. And I kind of want to show it off because I feel like I did it very neat. And I don't know if that's visible at all. But the way that you do the tubular bind off when you're doing it with a twisted ribbing is that for the stitches that are the knit stitches, you have to, instead of putting your needle in knitwise to take it off, you would put it through the back loop to take it off. And then instead of putting your needle purlwise through the knit stitch the first time, you would have to come around the back and basically stick it from like the left to the right as if you were purling after the stitch was twisted. And that was kind of difficult to do, but also okay. And after I had done it, I think for the neckline the first time, I also thought that maybe you could twist all your stitches ahead of time. And that way, when you're doing the sewn bind off, you wouldn't need to put the needle in a different way. You could just put it in knitwise and put it in purlwise. But the issue with that is that twisting the stitches makes it very, very tight. So I had tried to pre-twist some of those stitches when I was doing my last row of the ribbing, and it got to a point where the stitches were just too tight to manage, so I had to stop twisting them. And then I was like, oh, I'm not gonna remember like where in the bind off my stitches are twisted. So then I had to carefully put in some stitch markers so that I would know this is like exactly where I had stopped trying to twist everything because everything was getting too tight. And then when I was coming back with my needle, I knew that I could do the bind off in the normal way up until that stitch marker point, and then I have to go back to doing the thing where you're putting the needle in as if you wanted to twist your stitch. So that was something that was new and something that I learned in this project. And I am really happy with the way that the ribbing looks. I might take a picture of it and then insert a picture of it here too, because I think it just looks really, really neat, and I'm very proud of the ribbing that I did. So this is my Sonya shirt. I haven't really gotten to wear it all that much yet because I just finished it, but I will report back. It's very comfortable and I'm excited to wear it, and it seems like it'll be very easy to wear too since it's just a black t-shirt. Okay, moving on to works in progress. My first whip that I'm going to talk about is the High Falls Pullover by Andrea Gahn Knits, and this is the progress that I have made on it. I actually don't remember what it looked like at the time of my last episode. I didn't make that much progress on it, I don't think. I probably already had, I want to say that I had joined the front and back already. I know that one new part is the collar. So the collar I added this time around. And one thing about the collar is that I was trying out a different bind off technique. And this is the one that's actually written into the pattern, and she calls for a Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy bind off, which is not a bind off that I've used before. So I tried it out here. And I actually think that I was doing it a little bit wrong at first, or just doing it in a different way. I already don't remember how to do it, even though I did this probably a week or so ago. Because it was my first time doing this bind off, I had to find a tutorial for it on YouTube and follow along that way. And I think I had watched maybe 2 of them or a couple of videos, and some people had different methods for doing it, but I don't remember exactly the details of even what was done. But I think it looks pretty neat. I'm not sure that I like it more than the tubular bind off, to be honest. But I think it does look pretty neat. So I'm probably not going to change it again. I think it looks good, but I can always go back and change it if I do feel like I want to add a tubular bind off instead. So yeah, I don't think I talked anything about the pattern, but this is a pullover that has these eyelet rows, and it is meant to be a drop shoulder, but I am modifying mine slightly, and I'm also knitting it off gauge, but I'm modifying it so that the drop shoulder part is much less. And I'm planning to, instead of knitting the sleeve out straight, give it a little bit of a sleeve cap to do a little bit of shaping before knitting the sleeve straight. Oh, one other thing that I got for this knit is this little row counter. And this row counter is from Twice Sheared Sheep, and she has a knitting shop that sells this, and I think this is genius. So basically it is this chain that has these little beads with numbers. Let me see. And you could see where like my knitting is between these is between like the 6 and the 7 here, which means that I'm on my 6th row, and by the time I get around to this point again, I can then stick my needle in between 7 and 8, and basically helps me keep track of what row I'm on. And the reason that I got that and thought about like getting that is because I messed up the number of rows for the eyelets and for like the stockinette in between, because what happened was that when you're knitting it flat, you do the eyelet rows on the right side and then you purl across on the wrong side. And then after you finish those eyelet rows, then there's 6 rows of stockinette that happen. But then when I was thinking about, when I went into the round, I was counting the stitches from the last eyelet row, and there my mistake was that instead of counting for 7, I counted for 6, because I thought, oh, I just need, there's 6 rows of stockinette before I do the next eyelet row. But actually it's really 7, because I just forgot about the purl row that happens like after the eyelet row when you're knitting flat. So I don't know if it's super visible here, but I actually tried it on and decided to put even more of those 6 rows in between, so kind of like a shorter stockinette section, to make it more of a kind of design detail. So now across the front chest panel, maybe there are this area where there's actually more eyelets, and then they get further spaced out when you're near the top part and the bottom part. So I just turned that into like a little bit of a design detail. And then I had seen this kind of row counter probably online somewhere, and I thought that it would be perfect for this type of project to get one of these. So it'd be like much easier to keep track of how many or like which row I'm on and not have to count, because when you're counting them, it's prone to making mistakes. And then I feel like I'm always counting. So like by the time there's 4 stockinette rows, I'm like, okay, I have to count. There's 4 this time. I knit another row, I have to count again. Oh, now it's 5. But with this little row counter, I don't have to do any of that anymore. And I think that this product is just like pretty genius. For my braided loop cardigan that is still a work in progress, it's like an abandoned whip at this point that I have to pull out of its abandonment at some point. But I got one of those row counters that you put on your finger and you press a button, and it's an electronic one. But I found that it, first of all, didn't really fit my finger, and then second, it just didn't really flow into the knitting. Whereas this row counter, you just move it along as you would any other stitch marker, just putting your needle into a different hole. So I feel like within the flow of knitting, this fits in so well. And I just really, really like this product. So this is the state of my High Falls pullover, and I'm making pretty good progress on it, but didn't knit that much on it this time around. And the reason that I didn't knit that much on it is because I spent most of the last couple of weeks working on this sweater, which is a knit for my sister. And this is a sweater that I am self-drafting, and it is knit out of Woolfolk Far, which is this 100% merino wool in this chainette construction. Super, super soft. I'm pretty sure that this yarn is going to pill, and it already has like a little bit of fuzziness on it just from me knitting this and moving it around as I knit. So this sweater is so close to being done. I actually have knit already the binding and bound it off here, but I think we're gonna redo some of it. So I think last time on the podcast I had only knit the back panel, so I think I hadn't really talked much about anything at that point. But for this sweater, because I am self-drafting it, there was a lot of trial and error here. So it was pretty fun, but I guess this is probably what designers have to do, a lot of frogging and retrying things. So this is a kind of standard drop shoulder construction where you knit the back panel and then you pick up stitches for the front panels from the back shoulders and then join the front panels after you shape the neckline. And the first time that I did that, I think I wasn't really taking into account the width of the collar at all. Like maybe I had kind of forgotten that you put on a collar, or I just wasn't really imagining how wide that would be at all. So I shaped the neckline and it was a bit small. And at that point I was thinking, oh, you know, I had already knit it down probably to a few inches after the neckline, the front's joined. And then I was thinking, is this going to be too small or not? I would need to put on the collar and then have my sister try it on and block it also. So at that point, I knitted the ribbing for the collar, and then we blocked it and I had her try it on. And the collar basically was like very high against her neck, and it wasn't too tight necessarily, but it wasn't what she wanted for her sweater. So at that point I had to set it down for a couple of days because I knew that I was gonna frog it and redo it. And it always takes me just like a little bit of time before I work up the courage to redo it. So after I frogged it, then the way that I made the neckline bigger was that I added maybe like 4 rows here where there was no neckline shaping. So I put like more rows before the start of the neckline shaping. And then for the neckline shaping, I also added more rows of increases for the front panel. And the reason that I did that was because in like the first version, I think it also wasn't as round. So there was like more horizontal, or like the number of stitches that were at the bottom of the neckline was greater than what it is in this one. And this one, after we reknit the front panels and then joined them together, I put on the collar again and then had her try it on again, and I think it came out very nice. So we have like a much wider neckline that's going to be a lot more comfortable and a lot closer to what she wanted. One thing about the collar that I knit here is that I did this ribbing in the same needle size, and that was also kind of an experiment to see whether we liked it that way. And yeah, I think I'm kind of undecided about that. I wanted to try it out on the same size needle so that we get a little bit of, so that it would look a little bit bigger. So I was kind of trying to test out the design element, I guess, of having the ribbing look like it had bigger stitches than the stockinette portion. And I think we did achieve that. So I'm not sure. I think my sister said that she was interested in a folded over collar. And once she said that, we might test it out. I haven't done it yet, so we'll see. But anyways, yeah, doing the neckline, had to redo the whole front. Had to frog back up to basically just like the pickup for the front panels. And then for the sleeves, this is a drop shoulder, but I had thought about putting some short rows into the sleeve to give the sleeve a little bit more shape. And I did do that. So the first time that I knit both of the sleeves, I put in some short rows so that there would be like a little bit of a panel here, and it would give like the sleeve a little bit of shape. But the issue with that is that this actually is sized like a very standard drop shoulder, and the sleeve really didn't need that bit of short row shaping. And because it had that short row shaping, then there was like that little bit of extra fabric that did not look like it would be straight on the sleeve. I think the drop shoulder, it came down to basically around here. And so at this point, this angle is like almost horizontal. So if you're knitting your sleeve down from like an almost horizontal line, you would want to knit it flat. So I also had to re-knit both of the sleeves basically completely, because I thought that the short rows would be good there, but they turned out to not be necessary, and not only not necessary, but did not look right with them. So I did end up re-knitting that. And now I think the sleeve is pretty perfect. For the sleeve ribbing, I went down actually 2 needle sizes, and I think the like length of the cuff here is maybe 1.5 inches. So it's a little bit of a shorter cuff maybe. Actually, I'm not really sure what is standard, but this was made the end of the yarn, and it was kind of close enough, so I decided to just knit it to that length. The needle size that I used for the body of the sweater is a 6mm needle, and for the sleeve cuff, I think I went down not to a 5 I went down to a 5mm. So I went down 2 needle sizes for this sleeve cuff. And then for the bottom ribbing, I actually went down just 1 needle size. So this is knit on 5.5mm. But the reason that I think we're gonna redo the bottom here too is because, first of all, I bound off using tubular bind off, but I think it's a little bit too tight. So I think my bind off was just a little bit too tight, and that's already like one reason that I'm gonna need to do that over, or like kind of find a way to loosen it. I can feel like when you stretch on it this way that I can move that sewn yarn a little bit. So if I were just undoing the binding or redoing the bind off so that it would be looser, I maybe wouldn't have to undo the whole thing. But the other thing about the ribbing is that my sister wanted a little bit of a cropped sweater, and this is a cropped length, and it is the length that she wants. But the issue is that with the length of the ribbing, and the way that the ribbing cinches in the stockinette portion, it kind of rides up a little bit, and the stockinette portion will fold over the ribbing, kind of like a sweatshirt, like an oversized sweatshirt that has like a tighter hem portion of it. And she didn't really like that, and it didn't really like look correct at like the cropped length. So the thing that I think like we would want to do is basically have the ribbing be a shorter length. And when it is a shorter length, then it cinches in less. I guess this probably has to do with some kind of physics of some sort. But I see like the same thing with these like sleeve cuffs. If you knit a really, really long sleeve cuff, then, you know, it cinches in kind of more and more. And even this one, I think if it were to like knit up another 2 inches, I think it would cinch in even like a little bit more. Because here, I think given the length of it, it still is stretched out a bit by like the stockinette that is under it. So I think for this sweater, I'm gonna have to undo this bind off and then frog back to make this ribbing a shorter length, maybe even half the length of it. And I think then it will lay the way that we want it to lay. And then we also have to decide whether we're gonna redo the neckline or not. I think this neckline like has grown on me a lot, so I don't know, but if my sister wants to try the folded over neckline, then I think it's worth trying to get it to the way that she wants. But it was really fun to work on this sweater and to basically knit it as I went. I don't know if I could say like it's exactly self-drafted in that I didn't take any notes. But I guess that doesn't, I don't think actually it is self-drafted. I don't think whether or not I took any notes matters for that. I didn't really like measure anything or take stitch counts. I really just like knit as I went. And it was pretty fun to do it that way. But the only issue with that was that when I did need to go back, like when I was doing the neckline for the second time, then I think it would have been nice to have notes for what I did the first time to make sure that I was doing it differently. But I kind of like remembered a little bit, and then like looking at the comparison, I could tell that, okay, I must have put more increases because it is like a lot more round and there's a lot less of that like straight part at the bottom. But this was really fun to knit. I think having done a bunch of drop shoulder sweatshirts recently, pullovers, it was pretty easy to construct. And even if I didn't have a pattern or stitch counts, I guess for the sleeve, I did think about the circumference of the sleeve in a way. So I picked up at a rate of, I think, like 5 stitches per 7 rows. So that was something like, the way that I do it is that I pick up 3, skip 1, pick up 2, skip 1, pick up 3, skip 1, pick up 2, skip 1. And I just did that all the way around without counting at all. And starting from that point, then after I picked up all the stitches, I counted them, calculated the circumference, which I think like worked out to like 17 inches. And then measured the circumference of another sleeve of like a sweatshirt that I own, and then figured out how many decreases I would need to get from this 17 inches down to, I think this is 12 inches here, and basically spaced them out so that I would have an even decrease rate on the sleeve. So anyways, this is Joanne's sweater. It is very close to being done, and I think it will definitely be done by next time. The next 2 whips that I have are both new cast-ons. They were, I think, both projects that I talked about on the last podcast episode. So the first one is called the Ice Cream Cardigan, and it is a pattern from the Lina magazine for summer 2025. And it is this cardigan that's in this Really cool textured pattern. Yeah, I do not know how visible it is at all, but it's kind of a checkerboard kind of pattern with some broken rib and some reverse stockinette on the right side. And then the wrong side kind of looks like kind of a textured checkerboard also. This is a cardigan that is knit with one strand of silk mohair on 3.5 millimeter needles, and I did use the recommended needles and hit gauge. And the yarn that I'm using is a hand-dyed silk mohair silk from Shangdrok, and this is in the color Sakura. I got this yarn from during the Bay Area yarn crawl earlier this year, and I think that this pattern really feels like it is well suited for this yarn. So far I have just knit the back panel. I just finished knitting the back panel, so this is the full back panel, and this should be the length that I need for the armhole. And so now the next steps would be to pick up the front panels, then join everything, not in the round because it is a cardigan, but join the fronts and the backs into like one long piece of knitting, and then I can finish the length of the body before adding the sleeves. This one, when I started it, it does have like a little bit of collar shaping. So not only are there like some increases to make the kind of trapezoid shape, but there's also some shaping so that the collar part is a little bit lower than the highest points here. And when you're doing that knitting, you start with, I think, one side, and then you have to do the other side before putting them all together. And I kind of feel like it's not necessary because the difference here is just a couple of rows. And I think like in the silk mohair, that couple of rows is like so small in terms of like the length of the difference that it feels like it's a little bit of extra steps that you don't necessarily really need. But I haven't knit the neckband or anything yet, so maybe it'll turn out to be nice. But it was like a bit fussy to start, and I'm not sure like how necessary that will be. But this is coming out really well. This is fun to knit on. It's just so soft and squishy. This is kind of reminding me, I think there was this like hair accessory. Okay, this seems to happen every time, but my camera overheated again, and I wish that it would give me some warning before it would shut off, but I don't think it does. So anyways, that did give me a chance to look up the hair accessory that I was talking about, and it's called the Dew Scarf, or Dew something. Maybe it was Dew Scarf. Dew Scarf by Irene Lynn Knits, and I can insert a picture of it. But this, I think it also is knit out of a strand of mohair, so it has this kind of squishy quality to it. And yeah, this is just so fun to hold and squish around. So this is the ice cream cardigan. And I don't think I mentioned who the designer was. This is designed by Maria Gomez for Lina magazine. The last work in progress that I have that is also a new cast on, but I showed a swatch for it, I think, last episode, is the Penelope top by Sari Nordlund. And I am knitting mine out of a really, really fun yarn, which is the Sewrella yarn silk sock in the color The Well. And this is a 50% superwash merino, 50% silk yarn. And The Penelope top was designed for a drapier fiber. So it's meant to be knit up in like a silk or a linen, some kind of drapey fabric, because it has this little bit of lace that will happen at the bottom of the top. And it also has a round of eyelet holes that you create, and then you knit an I-cord drawstring that will cinch it in a bit before the bottom. And the top of it is this kind of scoop neck tank top where you knit all of the straps separately and join everything first, the neckline and the back, and then you join everything in the round after you shape for the armholes. And I am really enjoying knitting on this. This slight variegated colorway I think is so pretty, and I'm really enjoying seeing how it's appearing on this tank top. It is kind of soft greens and soft blues on a white yellowish kind of base color, and it is just been really fun to see how this variegated colorway is coming out. Maybe this, I don't know if this is considered to be fully variegated or semi-variegated, because it is like a very, very light color variation that's on it. And that was something that I was looking for, maybe for like the first kind of variegated project that I worked on. I wasn't sure like how much I like how variegated yarns look when they're knit up. I love how they look in the skein, but then when I see like knitted fabric, sometimes I feel like it's a little bit busy. But with this, because the color variegation is so light, I feel like it's really subtle and really pretty, and it is looking so beautiful. I just really like to look at it. And also this yarn is really silky and soft, and I think it's gonna have the perfect amount of drape for that drawstring and for this lace. This is the first Sari Nordland pattern that I'm knitting, and one thing that I notice is that I think she must be a much looser knitter than me, because I think for this pattern she recommends either 3 millimeters or 3.25 millimeters, and in order for me to hit gauge, which is 23 stitches, I think, I had to size up to a 3.75. So I had to go up at least 2 needle sizes. I can't remember if it was 3, but it was many needle sizes. I knit many swatches, and actually this was knit on 3.5 millimeters, so I think the end result is going to be a little bit looser than this swatch for the bottom lace portion of it. But I'm really enjoying the pattern so far, and this is the progress so far that I have on my Penelope top. Oh, there was one last thing that I wanted to talk about with regard to my Penelope top, which is that I'm kind of wondering whether or not I should alternate skeins. So this is like the amount that's left in the first skein, and I have 2 in total. And I'm not sure if I'm going to or not. I've never alternated skeins before. The only other hand-dyed yarn, that's not true, but the last project that I knit with hand-dyed yarn was my Fleur tee, and that was knit with Peninsula yarn, cotton wool fingering in a olive color, and that one is a tonal color, and I had got 2 skeins at the same time. I don't think they have any kind of dye lots associated with them, but for that one I did not alternate skeins, and it turned out totally fine. Like the color was very, very consistent. And I didn't alternate skeins for that project mainly because I didn't know about it. And now I've kind of heard more people talk about, especially with variegated yarns, to alternate skeins, or variegated and hand-dyed, probably hand-dyed tonals as well. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do that for this or not. That seems like something that I will have to learn on my own after I knit something up and discover that there is a very apparent line of demarcation between my two skeins. And then I'll have to decide at that point whether or not I want to go back and frog both the like new skein and part of the old skein so that I could start alternating for a project. And I kind of imagine that that's what I'm going to do for this, but I am curious if anybody has knit with hand-dyed yarns before, what you think about the whole alternating skeins thing, and how important it is, and also maybe like whether you think that these colors would require it, because yeah, I guess they look pretty similar to me, but I'm sure there could be a lot of variation. But would it be more variation that's already kind of apparent in this yarn? I do not know. So I feel like I am not going to alternate skeins, and we will see what happens, because I really think this is something that is like I'm gonna have to just learn from an experience where I find that I need to reknit everything, which maybe sounds kind of dumb, but that seems like the way that it will go for me. Okay, anyways, so those are all of my whips that I have, except for my abandoned whips. And the last thing that I wanted to share was my yarn acquisitions. And I have 2 new acquisitions. I feel like I have acquisitions every single episode, but I don't necessarily think my stash is too big at this point, so I think I'm okay with it. But the first acquisition that I got was from Sewrella Yarn's Summer in London collection, and I got the colorway Water Lily in Classic Sport, which is 100% superwash merino, and it's this soft green color, pastel-y green color. And originally when I saw this, I wanted to get this color for the High Falls Pullover. So both of my acquisitions are hand-dyed yarns, and they both were for pre-orders. And for pre-orders, the time that it takes from when you order to when you get the yarn can be some number of weeks. So I think I ordered this back in maybe June or like May, late May perhaps. And that was before I bought the other yarn that I did for the High Falls Pullover that I was knitting. So the sample that Andrea Gahn made for the High Falls Pullover was in Durarum Natura Candide, and she used this greenish color of that yarn, and I really liked the way that her sample looked, and that is what kind of, when I saw this color, I thought that it would make a really, really nice High Falls Pullover. So that's what I got it for originally, but now that I already started on that, I do not know what I'm going to do with this yarn, but it's so pretty, and I love this pastel-y color. The other acquisition that I got is also a pastel-y color, and this is Ruby and Roses hand-dyed yarn in the colorway Taro. And this is a very light purpley pink taro color. And this I got in the Plump Rose base, which is I think it's a weight that is kind of between fingering and sport. So it's called Plump Rose because it's kind of a plump version of the fingering weight base. And this one is 85% superwash merino and 15% nylon. And this is just like a really pretty pastel-y purple color. And got too much hair going on. One thing I was considering was maybe I could do some sort of project with these together. These colors I think are so nice together, but I also think that they wouldn't necessarily work in like a color work kind of project because they probably don't have enough contrast in terms of value because they are kind of the same value, I guess. Yeah, I think that's the right word for the color. But I'm not sure. Like these are giving me like ice cream colors, like a matcha ice cream and like a taro ice cream. And I think they're so pretty. And I'm very excited to have these and figure out what I'm gonna do with these. When I bought these two, I was thinking that I wanted to knit Sari Nordland's Dido tee out of it. I think there's also now Amy Sure Makes is coming out with the Oolong tee, which is similar in that it is a t-shirt that has a lace panel in the front. And that was something that I thought would be really pretty for this yarn. But I'm not really certain what I'm gonna do with these quite yet. But those were my yarn acquisitions for this episode. I think one thing I need to think about is as I'm looking at these colors, I think they're so beautiful and I love them so much, but I'm also not sure whether they're colors that like really look good on me or that like I would buy clothing in those colors. So something to think about for the future is maybe like when I am more like process knitting and knitting with the yarns that I am just drawn to versus when am I knitting for something that I think like will have a lot of use in my wardrobe. But that is kind of a thought for another time. Thank you so much for watching this episode and sticking around with me. If you've liked the episode, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.